Welcome back, everybody, to the Real World Podcast mini-series at the moment. We are in the middle of the Tape Crusaders. I am Matt Waters, as always, joined by Mike Thomas, my co-founder, really sort of the owner of the Real World hot brand property, which I'm just lucky to be riding the coattails of. Mike, how are you?
Doing well. I think you have the SoundCloud, though, so, we're kind of, it's like mutually assured destruction a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, without the SoundCloud, we've got no iTunes. You could take this onto YouTube, but I have all the credentials for that as well. So
yeah,
we're in a deadlock.
It's like a metaphor for free trade. We can't destroy each other because we depend on each other.
Exactly. And speaking of those things, SoundCloud.com/Mike and Matt, YouTube, we're under the Real World Podcast now. Find us everywhere, share us, send us around. We have hot opinions on your favorite films and franchises,
and what we lack in quality, we make up for in places you can access our opinions.
Exactly, and just the volume of our opinions that no one asked us for.
Yes.
Do you need 13 episodes of X-Men coverage? I think you do.
I think what the world was recognizing is that we need more takes from two middle-class white dudes who are straight, cisgender, and there's just a dearth of that worldview in the ether.
Yeah, and just to give it the slightest bit of diversity, you're American and British, so what more do you want, social justice warriors? Okay, so all of that wonderful banter out of the way, let's talk serious business with Tim Burton's Batman from 1989. So we just talked about Batman 66, which was quite something. That was kind of the only mainstream representation for Batman for a couple of decades. And it's nothing like what modern audiences think of when they think of Batman. However, this is. So I think it's a very important film to talk about because it really established the tone of the sort of modern interpretation of Batman for the mainstream. Incredibly popular film, very successful film, and it's snowballed into many other projects, including everyone's favorite Batman the Animated Series. So regardless of what anyone thinks of the quality of the film, Mike and I think, have slightly different opinions here. I don't think anyone could deny how big and important a landmark this was for Batman as a franchise, which is helpful because we're talking about it as a franchise.
Yeah, it's like, Hitler was important to the the history of the world. You can't deny that.
Are you calling Batman 89 the Hitler of movie?
I am. I went there. It's Hitler. No. I think you're absolutely right. Its significance is unquestioned. Its impact, its footprint, so to speak, is unquestioned. It was a big deal in the mainstream. It was a big deal for Batman fans. It was a big deal for comic fans. It was just a big deal.
Yeah, massively. And it took a while to get made. If the internet were, a thing in the 80s, this would have been a project that would have been, famous for being in developmental hell. I think all told, it took them a decade to go from saying, hey, we'd like to try Batman again, to the release of this film. I mean, I'm sure at some point between 66 and, the late 70s, someone said those words out loud, hey, we'd like to try Batman again. But in terms of this film as a project with the key people involved, took about 10 years. And I think things like the release of the first Superman movie, the Richard Donner one in 78, probably helped a lot. In the 80s, we get huge Batman stories that revive popularity of Batman in the comics, such as The Killing Joke, Dark Knight Returns, Year One. These are all things most people have heard in these days. So those things, I think, really helped get this made. And they were apparently fighting an uphill battle against people, like the studio people, who wanted it to be more like 66, more family-friendly, more silly, as opposed to this doubled down, sort of gritty version of Batman that had begun to emerge in the comics. And it's just everything about it, like the number of times it got shut down and brought back up, and everything from the cast to Tim Burton, the director, was controversial as news coming out at the time. Like, people heard that Michael Keaton was going to be Batman, and this is a guy that's known for comedy projects like Mr. Mom and various other things, and there were just endless protest letters and I don't know how far this went, but I do know it was a massive controversy. Tim Burton wasn't really a proven director at this time. He'd done Pee Wee Herman, and he'd just done Beetlejuice just before this came out. So at the time, this was unthinkable. Like, forget people throwing a hissy fit over Ben Affleck. People forget this because of how iconic it is now, but Heath Ledger was a bit maligned when it was announced as a casting. But Michael Keaton in the 80s announced to play Batman, a guy that is not huge, a guy that is a comedic guy. That's kind of insane to me.
Yeah, it's funny in retrospect because while the Burton Batmans were not a big part of my childhood, it's definitely what I associated the name Michael Keaton with. And so whenever people said Michael Keaton was a comedic guy, I was always confused and taken aback. So I always actually associated him with these movies. I somewhat ironically now I associate these movies with bad comedy. So, but what can you do? I know. So one of the most again, while these movies haven't been big for me, I did have a fairly unique experience with the 1989 Batman, in that I got to see a special screening of it with one of the producers. And this is a producer who's been heavily involved in Batman. I can't remember his name for the life of me. But he does a lot of things with this. He speaks a lot about the 89 Batman and Keaton and Burton and all that. And, he tells a very romanticized version of the story. But the big thing with Keaton they said, is that they really loved his eyes. Like, his eyes were just like there was a danger in his eyes that kind of sold him on Keaton as Batman. That I think is at least interesting to note, even whether or not you care or agree or anything like that. It's there, and I can kind of see that. There's something about Michael Keaton that is aloof and dangerous in that, or it's aloof and you don't know it could easily turn into danger. But regardless, it's interesting.
Yeah, I think Tim Burton, obviously he'd worked with him on Beetlejuice, so he was very familiar with what he could and couldn't do, but he talked about the eyes, like you said, and he was really looking to portray a more sort of tortured version of Bruce Wayne, and he said that Michael Keaton could really sell that. So while to the people who knew exactly what kind of film they were trying to make were very confident about this, I would imagine at the time people heard Michael Keaton and they started thinking, oh, it's going to be another campy one. And that is the furthest thing from what they were going for. And it actually required a level of damage control where they rushed out this sort of 60-second trailer with like no music or like unfinished music or something. And that then created the opposite reaction, where this thing was incredibly anticipated. The posters for the film were being stolen. Apparently, this trailer was selling on DVD or tape, I guess it would have been at the time. Sorry, for outrageous amounts of money. People were going to go and see films just so they could see the trailer, and then they would walk out like Phantom Menace style. So that's quite a turnaround they managed there, from one of the biggest casting controversies in modern film history to one of the most anticipated films in modern film history. So yeah, released in June '89, budget of $35 million. This thing made $411 million plus dollars. So that's Deadpool kind of profit margins there. Which
Jack Nicholson got all of it.
Yes, we'll talk about what Handsome Jack got as we get through to the cast. But yeah, he got a pretty good deal there. Directed by Tim Burton, as I said. Odd choice, retrospectively and at the time. Like, this guy was kind of unheard of, I suppose, or less heard of at the time. And if you think of Tim Burton now, obviously most people know he did Batman, but it's not the kind of film you would associate with him now. And it's one that he doesn't really look back on all that fondly if you look at a lot of interviews with him. written by Sam Hamm, which is one of the better names in the world, and a guy called Warren Scarron. Basically, Sam Hamm wrote most of the film a certain way, and then there was a big writer's strike, so they had to... He couldn't continue working on it, someone else was brought in, changes were made, and the long and short of what I've heard is everything good in this film is Sam Hamm, and everything bad is Warren Scarron and Tim Burton, so there's that.
So Sam Hamm wrote nothing?
Okay, so there's your earliest preview of me and Mike's differing opinions on this film. Very quickly, I think it's...
He cast Billy D. Williams? Was that in the script that he wrote? You must cast Billy D. Williams? I'm trying to find the good things in here, so you're not giving me a lot to work with.
Okay, I think this is a decent film. I think there's a lot of good stuff going on. It's just, in spaces, it's a little boring. And I think time hasn't been that kind to it. But overall, I think it's decent. So
I'm tempted to dare you to list the things you find good about it, but let's start more traditionally with us. What is this movie about?
Okay, so this is a far cry from Batman 66. This is a stripped down, more authentic Batman. We are early in his career, possibly first couple of months. We were trying to discuss this off air at some point, and yeah, somewhere in the first few months of being Batman.
Yeah. It's not his first night out, like we see his first night out in Batman Begins, but it's very early. He's just kind of like a rumor. He's not actually people have heard of him, but they don't know anything about him.
Yeah. And we'll come back to that in a moment as I list things I like about it. So yeah, Bruce Wayne, early on, he intervenes in a break-in at Axis Chemicals by the mob led by Jack Napier. Everyone knows that name, right? So the police and the mob are exchanging gunfire. Batman and Jack do battle, and Jack accidentally falls into an enormous container of what we presume to be toxic waste because it's green. Batman flees the scene, starts up a love affair with journalist Vicky Vale. Meanwhile, Jack is revealed to have survived and been transformed into the man that we know as the Joker. So he murders his former boss, begins an aggressive takeover of the mob, but he grows jealous of media coverage of Batman, which is a hell of a motivation if you ask me. So he terrorizes the city, he's poisoning beauty products, he attempts to kidnap Vicky Vale a couple of times, Batman intervenes. Bruce destroys Axis Chemicals and he eventually reveals his identity to Vicky, and then he starts to go over the night of his parents' murder, and he realizes, controversially, that the killer of his parents was a much younger Jack Napier. Joker launches his final scheme, which is, well, I guess he didn't know it was going to be his final scheme. He's going to give away millions of dollars during a parade, but instead he, of course, tries to gas everyone using poison-filled balloons. Batman puts a stop to that. Joker takes Vicky up to the top of an old church, presumably to try and get away with her on a helicopter. Batman gives chase. They battle on a roof. Joker is attempting to flee on this helicopter, but Batman uses a grappling hook to tether him to a gargoyle, the weight of which makes him fall to his death. Not sure if that was intentional. We will get to Batman and his intentional and unintentional killings in a moment. And at the end of the film, the press gather around to hear word that Batman has donated to the city of Gotham a bat signal so they can call upon him when in need. And we see him looking up at the signal as the film closes. It's not the best plot in the world.
No, it's thin. It's very thin.
Well, this thing is very much about the tone, the key theme of Batman versus Joker, and the performances from Keaton and Nicholson, and I think it's a film about tone and sort of saying, right, this is what Batman can be, rather than the campy version.
I think that's actually my fundamental issue with the movie, is that it's all about this change in tone. I guess I feel like, so you know it's real, that people always point to this as the change in tone, and I think in a way that's objectively true, in the sense that because everyone feels like it's more serious, it is more serious, and therefore, since tone is so subjective is people's reaction to tone is somewhat subjective. But when you watch it, it's impossible to take just about anything in this movie seriously.
Well, yes and no. I think so. You've got Batman as the way he's treated is a big thing. Like, as we saw in '66, he's deputized by the police. He's getting thumbs ups. He's in a brighter costume. He's out in the day. He's friendly. He's just a superhero who happens to wear a bat costume. In this, we get this recurring theme of, calling him the Bat, and he's an urban myth. And there's the first scene, we've got these two muggers who are saying, "Oh, I've heard he drinks blood," and this is a Batman that's appearing from nowhere and vanishing to nowhere, and it's a much more, he's trying to scare people. Like, the first thing he does in the film is he stops, he grabs these muggers and then he tells them to tell their friends, and he's like, "I am the Batman," etc. So I think that alone is significantly darker or different than what we had seen before then.
I guess I should say there's no. It's when one film, the '66 film, is so on one end of the serious spectrum, where everything is done to be as absurd and comedic as possible. Almost anything would be more serious, and I don't doubt that the intention was to make it more serious. But almost nothing about the dialogue or the acting is so hammy. Like, it's almost it's almost like a comedic version of what serious acting is. Like, there's times where you feel like if you're supposed to take this seriously, it's like you might as well watch The Room. Like The Room was intended to be serious too. Almost no one feels like a human being in this movie. I just can't get around the fact that it's just there's nothing. It's not funny really, and it's not serious, and I rather just a movie. It didn't do either well, as far as I'm concerned.
Wow.
What would you point to as being like, wow, these are the moments where the movie just nailed it?
I think the first scene is pretty effective with him, appearing to stop these muggers and everything. Like, that's immediately saying, "This is our Batman." The way he's treated, the way he acts.
But those muggers, were they in any way they felt like cartoon characters?
Yes, but this was the early '90s, the late '80s even.
Okay, but that's my point, though, is that
That's what I'm saying, where I feel that things like time haven't been kind to it. There's the fact that a lot of the special effects look terrible. Like, whenever he is ascending or rappelling from nowhere, it looks awful. And also just the tone of the time, you can looking at it now, it does seem sillier than I think. I mean, I don't know. I was literally born in '89. I was 3 months old.
But you've seen movies in the '60s and '70s and know that people were able to come across like actual human beings in film.
Yes, but I've also seen a lot of films that are well regarded that have quite silly, like a lot of action films have some pretty silly or portrayals of characters.
And a lot of those action movies aren't good, though.
No, but I'm saying things that are well regarded.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean they're good. This movie's well regarded. It's not good.
Your opinion. Also, at the time, people did think this was very dark and serious, like this.
And that's why I'm saying I think it's worth noting that it objectively succeeded in its goal. I don't know how anybody can watch this and find it serious.
It failed the Mike Thomas test. Who cares about how many people like this? It failed the highest of all standards.
Yes, it frankly did. But I can't get around that. I don't think that means the movie's irredeemable. I feel like that's such a weird thing for the movie, for people to still hang its hat on, that this is a serious movie.
Well, I think because of... Okay, for some people, 66 is enormously damaging to the legacy of Batman, and this is almost damage control. I don't fully subscribe
I would never take
that.
away the importance of this film or its significance in any way. That doesn't mean, though, it's still great. I don't... It's nearly impossible for me to relate to anyone who can at least I mean, like, you're not saying it's a perfect movie, but I'm saying, like, some people still think this movie is great and, like, is one of the best movies of a comic book character. And that just seems insane to me. But, I mean, I shouldn't spend all this time arguing with imaginary people who are not here, but still.
Instead, argue with just me and our imaginary audience.
Yeah.
Or for the benefit of our imaginary audience, I should say. I sort of agree and don't agree with you. Like, there is undeniably a slightly... I mean, it's a much less campy tone, but there is still elements of silliness in it. And I personally find it hard to tell whether that is just the time or, you know, like looking back at it from a modern standpoint, how much of it is Tim Burton just flaunting the fact that he isn't a huge comic book fan and like not quite knowing what to do with it. I don't know.
And I think that actually gets to the probably the biggest issue with this movie is the director. I think I remember the AV Club had this great line like 5 years ago. It's like, you always know when you're watching a Tim Burton movie, but you often have to ask yourself why you're watching it. And there is no doubt when you watch this is a Tim Burton film. Like, its style, its tone, its look, it is Tim Burton. But that style, that tone, that look only work with certain stories. And it's not that it's never worked. Like I really enjoy Ed Wood. I think Sleepy Hollow is a lot of fun. But the absurdist gothic Burton just doesn't really. I don't want to say it couldn't work with a Batman story, because Batman is so inherently absurd that to take it infinitely seriously is probably a flaw. But it didn't work. I don't like this movie. I struggle to find anything good about this movie.
See, I think this is one of the least Tim Burton films, especially compared to the sequel, which we'll be talking about next time. But it doesn't have like the musical cues that I think of when I think Burton. It doesn't have the sort of. I mean, the city of Gotham is undoubtedly, it doesn't look like a real city, and that is very him. But it also doesn't look quite as sort of fantastical as some of his other films. Again, in comparison to the next one. I mean, there are certain, like, I don't know. I personally, if I didn't know this was about a Tim Burton, I probably wouldn't be able to immediately guess that it was if I watched it.
And that's fair. That's fair. I think the movie is always in constant conflict of, we want to make this a serious Batman movie, but Tim Burton's making it. Yeah,
it's impossible to divorce Tim Burton from it. Like, knowing he is a part of it, it's inescapable, and just all the sort of popular theories and things he said, and just anything. There is just this through line that he this film. I mean, you don't feel it's great, but I feel this film is sort of good in spite of him, and I think that giving more control to him the next time around was a mistake, because, like, talking about the most controversial aspects of this story, stuff like Joker being the killer of Bruce's parents, stuff like Vicky Vale being let into the Batcave by Alfred, all of Batman's like wanton killing. I don't know if all of that is on him, but certainly those first two choices are 100% his, and they are. I don't know anyone that enjoys those choices personally, particularly Joker as the killer of Bruce's parents. Like, I don't know if he feels that it was needed to make it a more personal rivalry and to like explain why they're rivals, but I think the fact that one's in a bat costume and one's a clown, and they're sort of both operating above and around the law, and they're both arguably insane, and just sort of the one-upsmanship that develops with them, I don't think you need any personal motivations between them beyond who they are.
Yeah, and I think it cheapens the dynamic a little bit.
It definitely does.
And I can understand like the temptation to do it because motivations with villains and superheroes is often so, I don't know, broad, but it was unnecessary. It definitely cheapened the dynamic dynamic there between those two. And I think, like thematically, the idea that Joker is just basically the bizarro version of Batman is important, and it kind of makes him the iconic villain of Batman, is that this is who Batman could have been in some ways. And to kind of remove that element of it is unfortunate.
Yeah, very. There is a popular theory that he isn't actually the killer, it's just that Bruce sees the killer of his parents on whoever he's facing, and this was a thing that happened in the comics way back in the day. In the 40s, 50s, he would see the face of his parents' killer as whoever he was fighting at that time. And if you extrapolate it further down to when we get to Batman Forever, where there is a scene where when he's explaining to Robin why he doesn't kill people, he says something about how you look for another face after you've done it, and it keeps going, and you realise it doesn't actually lead anywhere good. I'm completely paraphrasing and misquoting and butchering that, but the theory is that he kills Joker here, comes to realise he probably wasn't my parents' killer, and realises this was a horrible mistake, and then adopts the no-kill rule and tries to pass that on to Robin. That's probably giving a level of cerebralness that Tim Burton and Batman Forever are completely not capable of. But it is a theory nonetheless to try and explain away a poor creative decision.
I kind of like that idea, actually. I think the movie that provides so little context for what happened, you either have to commit to it. Otherwise, that is such an under the surface interpretation based on the evidence in the actual movie.
Yeah, you fully have to dig. And again, I like this film, but just while we're on this theme of poor choices, Tim Burton talks a lot in interviews, on the commentary, whatever else, about how he wanted to explore the idea of why Bruce would be Batman in the first place, and like what would cause this man to put on a bat suit and go terrorize people in the night and whatnot. He talks about it a lot, and he says that Keaton was instructed to play it this way and to communicate this sort of broken Bruce Wayne and whatnot. But there's nothing in there in terms of dialogue, in terms of flashbacks, in terms of scenes that really, there's no, like, this is why I'm Batman. There's no philosophy behind it. It's all just left to you assuming to know, you being on the same wavelength as Burton. And, like, I don't need a full monologue about this is why I am Batman. But for there to be absolutely nothing whatsoever, and, like, we get the very brief moments with his parents' death and everything, but I feel there could have been more, without doing a full origin story, a Batman Begins style thing, but just something anywhere in there. Like, Vicky finds out he's Batman, maybe some explanation there at that point.
And I think that gets to a huge issue with the film, is that Gotham City is not the vibrant character that it needs to be to provide the necessary need for Batman. Like, the issue with being thrown right into Batman, like having Batman be the first person you see, is that there isn't that like clear need to appoint a fascist dictator to take over the crime, like dealing with criminals, when there's not enough investment in the story in Gotham in the first place.
Yeah, I think that's sort of like I think there's sort of a leftover element from 60s Batman here, where it's just taken at face value. He's just a good guy. He's just a superhero. And I think they forgot to address that when they were trying to bring it around to this Frank Miller, this Alan Moore Batman, this as you said, the fascist version. Because we know the reason he exists in modern interpretations is because the police weren't getting the job done. There's corruption. Like, it's an unfightable war against crime, so he stepped up. This is much more just, it's a normal city, and like, is there actually a need for him at this point? So I think that was sort of, I don't know if he just felt that he was doing it on some sort of artistic level that was subtle and whatnot, but I don't feel there's enough there to say, this is why this dude is Batman.
Yeah, I think it just, I think unlike a lot of other superheroes, it's really important for Batman for there to be a true reason, a need for Batman, both as a character, both as Bruce as a character and for the city itself. Like, why would the city just align itself with this psychopath? Why would this psychopath decide to be, Batman?
Yeah.
And I think those are both basically, missing might be too strong of a word, but shallow.
Yeah, they're telling the story of he starts as an enemy of the police and he ends up, having a signal, call me when you need me kind of thing. And nowhere in between there is there real... I mean, he stops the Joker when the police couldn't, but there's nothing before that. We've said everything. I'm just going around in circles here, but I wasn't a fan of that. And yeah, just Burton generally seems to... I think it's pretty clear he is more interested in the Joker than he is Batman.
But I mean, even the Joker felt... it's almost like they invested time in the wrong... It's like the Joker's almost a character you should take for granted far more than Batman himself. Because with Batman, there is still so much support for his existence in the first place from everyone around him that... what did all that time in Joker and knowing who Joker was before he was Joker do?
Not a lot.
No. This Joker, it's actually an element of the Killing Joke that I actually even don't like either, which is just that I don't think you need to know Joker's motivation much. I think his motivation or his backstory doesn't really add a lot. If anything, it kind of takes away.
Yeah, the difference there is the key line in The Killing Joke is when he talks about how he basically hints that what we've seen in flashback isn't actually true. That it's a multiple choice backstory, and it's recurred in the comics where
and the Dark Knight.
Yeah, and exactly, it's used there. Whereas here, this is presented as fact. It is within the story. Like, he's referred to by name. When he comes back as Joker, people know him still as Jack. Like, I personally don't like the choice to make him a mobster and to give him a full origin. I'm sort of willing to say, okay, this is your take on it. This is your interpretation. Show me what you're going to do with this. And I don't think it's terrible. I just prefer it if... I think he works as a character because he is such a wild card, because he has anonymity, because he defies the logic of everything else. Like, that's the whole reason why he stumps Batman, because Batman works within a world where if I do this, they will do this kind of thing. And Joker says, nah, I'm just going to do my thing. Have fun trying to stop me. And instead you have... I mean, he does gradually morph more into the Joker we know, but just early on when he's essentially still himself, he just laughs a bit and wears purple more. I personally don't like that, but I wouldn't call that like a knock on the film as much as it's just not personally for me. I know plenty of people that do like it, but that's just not a choice that I like. I mean, we've talked about, Bruce Wayne and Joker a lot. Should we get into the cast of this film?
Yeah, I'll keep saying that. I keep coming back to the word weird, but it is... The choices they make are so odd. In retrospect, it's so clear. It was such a shock to watch Batman Begins and see Jim Gordon be this big character, because to me, Gordon was just this buffoon.
Yeah, totally.
Who was needless and kind of similar to the 66 Batman, that it seemed like he was there just because they needed someone there to say the lines. I didn't get that at all. I mean, is there anything you feel need to say about that?
About Gordon?
Yeah.
No, I'm the same way. Like, growing up, I thought of Gordon as just sort of a bumbling man who was almost getting in the way. And
it was mind-blowing to discover that, stuff like Year One existed, where stories are actually being told with him long before.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is what you get in a, almost 80-year canon. Characters change dramatically. At one point, I'm pretty sure he was like this, and then there was a call to sort of expand the the wider universe, the characters around him, and yeah. But yeah, growing up, Pat Hingle was my Commissioner Gordon. But...
Yes, he was, and he sucked. Actually, probably the Batman the Animated Series. Gordon was my Gordon. Anyway, it's always fun to go back and watch this and see how unimportant Gordon is. Yeah. And the same pretty much goes for Alfred.
He's just a nice man. Michael Goff is just a nice man.
He's a nice old man. He brings Batman cold soup, and he doesn't tell
Not
Batman.
This time.
Not this time, but you can tell he's brought this man plenty of cold soup in the past, and Batman just doesn't remember. But he's just a sweet old granddad that I love him.
Yeah,
but he's not a character.
No, not this time.
Yeah,
not much next time either. But this one, he's got like 5 or 6 lines, it feels like.
Yeah. It feels like Alfred where he's there because he's supposed to be there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he's just been
Billy D. Williams, love Billy D. Plays Harvey Dent in what was, I actually think, kind of a great casting and kind of tragic to me that we don't get to see what would have happened with that.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. He signed on to do this role on the understanding he would get to do Two-Face down the line. And it was written into his contract and everything, I think, and they had to buy out his contract to replace him. But, it's a real shame that they... I mean, there's definitely promise here, but if you just take what is here alone, it's not really much of a... It's not necessary, I don't think, like, as a character.
Yeah. It's funny because it feels like a character that only exists so the world feels a bit more lived in when he comes back as Two-Face, which is great. But
and they never did that.
Yeah, they never did that. And apparently, like, Tim Burton was explicitly not interested in doing anything that felt like a sequel. So it was just like, why'd you do it in the first place?
Because he was young and they gave him some money.
Yeah. Robert Wheel plays a photographer right? Photographer?
No, I think he's meant to be... See, this is the thing. I think of Vicky Vale as a journalist, but in this she's a photographer, and this dude seems to be the sort of the scoops man.
Yes.
I
always prefer my comic book and superhero movies to be more of an ensemble, as we discussed a lot. So I think this was a good idea. I don't know. It seems like a surprising amount of screen time went to him, though.
Yeah, he's pretty charming. Like, he's got some funny moments. He claims that he was supposed to die, and his performance convinced them to keep him alive because they liked the character. He was a original creation of the writers. There are quite a few characters in this that like had never appeared before, or some things that are just ever so slightly off, like Axis chemicals instead of Ace chemicals. And yeah, this dude. It has never existed before, and I don't think did again. So,
yeah, and then that brings us to the biggest supporting character after Batman and the Joker, which is Vicky Vale, played by Kim Basinger, and basically all the Burton Schumacher Batmans they each had a main female character who didn't get to do a whole lot, but was usually like the third most important character in the story. She's there. Bruce immediately falls in love with her, it seems.
That's what Bruce do.
He just immediately falls in love with whatever woman is cast.
The nearest blonde woman.
Yeah. I don't know. I didn't find her that interesting. They stick her in the damsel in distress role. Oh, it's like sequence over and over and over again.
Screaming and fainting and
yeah.
I think you talked about how no one feels like a person. I think she's one of the closer people to doing that.
Yes, it's almost like in this sea of absurdity, there's like a human being was plopped in there.
Yeah,
and it's almost jarring at times.
I guess. I think they were going for grounding it, but yeah, I guess it is that too.
When so much is absurd, it was hard to take like It's like watching Chris Parnell in a Saturday Night Live skit. It's like, why are you being normal? Like, everyone else is out of their fucking mind on some acid trip, and you're acting like a normal human being.
I do think she's got pretty good chemistry with Michael Keaton. Like, I think their sort of meet cute at the beginning is quite charming.
Yeah, that was okay. Not bad.
Yeah, but she does very much. She quickly devolves into just an object to be kidnapped and rescued.
Yeah,
and little agency, and she's there.
It's unfortunate because Kim Basinger is a good actress.
Yeah,
or at least I've seen her be good in things. But it's not something you can be overly invested in.
Yeah.
I don't think.
She was a late casting as well, because they had they had Sean Young, which I guess Sean can also be a lady's name. She was all cast, and then they filmed a scene where Vicky and Bruce were riding horses, and she got injured, so they had to replace her. And it was going to be Michelle Pfeiffer, who of course came to be Catwoman, but she and Michael Keaton were dating at the time, and Keaton was like, I don't want to work with my girlfriend. So Kim Basinger got the part.
Interesting.
Yeah. Very interesting considering what happens 2 years later. 3, I guess.
Yeah. I guess the main thing we left out to talk about is that Batman kills a bunch of fuckers in this movie.
Yes, he does.
It was especially jarring, the scene where he blows up the factory, where it was it didn't even feel like him making a choice. It didn't feel like a choice. It was just like, oh yeah, gotta kill these people. NBD.
Yeah, there's a fight scene near the end where he throws one of Joker's henchmen to his death, and it's he's in the heat of this battle. He's mostly getting his ass kicked until then. Maybe he doesn't intentionally kill Joker. The dude drops explosives into a factory full of chemicals, which explodes massively as he drives away, and there are people right next to those explosives when he drops them. That is a murder. That is at least several people murder. I don't know how many people were in this factory. Joker was shipping these poisons throughout the city. I would imagine that takes more than a few people.
Yeah.
But he murders people.
He just flat out murders people, and it becomes a continuous thing.
Okay, so we didn't talk about this when we talked about 66, because he does threaten to kill people in that, and I think he did kill people in the series, not brutally, because it was predominantly a kids show, but I think a large part of the Batman character is he doesn't kill people, and we've had 2 films now, and that element still hasn't been portrayed to the masses. And it is worth noting that the idea that he doesn't kill hasn't been there from day one, and there was, for the first couple of years, he did kill people. He even had a gun at one point, which is another huge Batman no-no. But broadly speaking, he does not kill, and we have still not seen that represented, and it's going to get even more ridiculous next time. I just think that's pretty interesting. That when I think of Batman, the big elements are dead parents, doesn't kill people, the villains, the suit, the knight, etc. So it struck me as odd coming back to these with little memory of these specifics to see how we still don't have that core, for me, what is a core tenet of the character represented.
Yeah, and I think that's something that is important, because it's important to Batman convincing himself he's the hero, or he is a hero, or that he's doing the right thing. And I think that's important regardless of whether or not you agree with him or not. But it's not that I wouldn't be okay with an interpretation of Batman where he kills people. It's that there's no acknowledgement that's what he's doing. Yeah,
no guilt, no this isn't like a policeman in the middle of a firefight, trying to save his own life. He rolls in there and he just kills people.
Yeah. I just don't get that. I don't understand that choice in filmmaking. But that's the scary part, is that it didn't even feel like something they considered. It felt like something that just happened, and they didn't even second guess it.
No. But hey, Tim Burton doesn't really give a shit about Batman or comic books. So,
all right. Anything else from this movie?
Well, I think we've got to talk about Jack Nicholson. Like,
okay.
I mean, for a long time, this was the definitive Joker. For me, it wasn't. I was never like madly attached to this, but going back to look at it for this, I think he's a pretty perfect casting. Like, Jack Nicholson can play crazy, like in his sleep, and that first scene where he's in the chair, and he's asking to be handed the mirror, that is iconic for a reason, I think. And there are moments where I'm not a huge fan of some of the outfits he's wearing, but that first scene where he walks in and kills his former boss, where he's wearing the hat, that looks like it's come directly from the front cover of The Killing Joke, and I appreciate that sort of level of detail. And there are scenes I don't like. I don't particularly like the scene where he bursts into the museum or whatever it is with the boombox and starts painting all the paintings. That's
literally the only scene I like.
I know it is, and that's perfect. I knew that was a scene you didn't like as well. But I like him for the most part. He sells it as kind of scary. I don't know. I think it's a very good performance. It's certainly an iconic one, so I thought we should at least talk about it for a moment, if nothing else. Also, the fact that he talked his way into one of the more favourable contracts in film history.
Yeah, he made a ton of money off of this movie.
He's billed first on the poster as Jack Nicholson, and then it's Michael Keaton. He got a percentage of box office. He didn't have to turn up to certain stuff. They had to record basketball games for him to watch while getting his makeup put on. He got to veto certain aspects about the writing and the costume and the makeup. Like, this very diva-ish demands from Mr. Nicholson here. But I mean, I think casting him after the news of Michael Keaton being in it probably helped a lot to sort of legitimize the film a bit more, because Burton talked about that. I listened to the commentary for this, and he constantly talks about how much he likes using what he calls real actors in a comic book movie. So he's like looking down his nose at comic book movies and then saying, the joys of working with Jack Nicholson and Jack Palance and whoever else. And like, there's no getting around it. Like, Jack Nicholson is like a titan of the industry, and one of his most iconic roles is Batman. So that's another sort of legacy thing for this film.
Yeah, I think my issue is not so much with Nicholson, it's more like the characterization of the Joker in this movie. It just feels random. It doesn't like... It's like the whole idea with the Joker is he doesn't have a plan, but that's also kind of like a lie he's telling himself. It's like he does believe in things, and he does do things for a purpose, but he tries to convince himself and thus everyone else that it's like he's above it all by not caring. And I don't think that's true. Like, all these things he's doing in this movie just feel like stupid and pointless.
Well, I think, like I said in the synopsis, I think, because, I mean, you see him, he sits down at the desk and he's got that newspaper, and he's angry that people are writing about Batman and not about him. And, he's been disfigured, so he goes after beauty products, and...
Ooh.
I know, right? I do and don't agree with you. Like, it's a more focused Joker than we're used to from modern versions, where he is just Chaos the Man. But I think that's on purpose.
But it's like it's so petty. Like, it's so...
It is, but like this, that isn't that most supervillains? Like, aren't most supervillains on some level?
But isn't Joker not supposed to be most supervillains?
Yes, but he's also a clown man. And I think it's on purpose. I think he's gradually transitioning from Jack, who's going a little bit funny, to, by the end, I think he is full on Joker. Like, I don't know what his plan was after he got rescued in the helicopter, but like, he full on is killing those people.
But just the idea that even, granted, the Gotham's police force do not seem to be our finest, but like, just the idea there's a person with a helicopter who can rescue him like doesn't even make internal sense.
Yeah. Well, he's in control of this mob now. I don't know. And another part of his motivation, he says he wants his face on the $1 bill. And when he's throwing all that money out on the parade, all of the notes, I think it's a scene that gets cut out, but like it turns out all the notes he's throwing into the crowd have his face on them, so they're not real money.
Ooh.
So it's like he wants notoriety and to be known, I guess. And I mean, it's
what a terrible pain that would be to all the people who died due to poisoning.
It's fine.
I don't have this money. Oh, I'm dead.
Well, no, he gassed them afterwards. At first, he was just giving away money. But yeah, I mean, there is an element of sort of, extravagant showmanship to the Joker. Like he's not operating behind the scenes. He's doing big, flamboyant things, and I think tying that to a character that starts out as clearly the number 2 in this organization who has aspirations of going higher, and then transitioning that over to being like the psychotic killer who wants to be written about and known and considers himself an artist or whatever. Like, sure, none of this is quite Joker, but I think it's narratively logical.
Okay.
Personally, again, I don't like mobster Joker. I don't like origin story Joker. Personally, but I won't hold those things against Tim Burton compared to him being the killer of the Waynes and whatever else, and Batman killing. Those are just choices that personally I don't like, but I'm sure plenty of people do. Because as we wrap up here, I think it's important to, as we move away from this film, to again hammer home what a huge success this was, and it has a real legacy. It definitely led to the animated series, which uses the same opening theme tune. Yeah,
it's fun. I did when I picked up on some musical cues that were the same. I'm like, that sounds familiar.
Yeah, I guess I didn't consciously know that, but then as soon as I heard it, I was like, oh, that totally is, isn't it? And certain sort of props and design elements were used in the animated series. Michael Keaton chose to speak in a lower voice when he was in the Batsuit because he believed it was really obvious that Bruce was Batman, and that is obviously something that, for better or worse, has endured since then, with Christian Bale sort of angrily whispering and whatever Ben Affleck is doing as well. And it's credited with changing movie marketing, and especially sort of superhero films, and it's the blueprint for a superhero movie. Like, the level of merchandise, I think at the time it was the most expensive movie marketing campaign ever. The logo was everywhere, on t-shirts, on hats, on posters. So I and also just sort of a darker tone where Superman, I personally don't like any of the Superman films, but they have this sort of all-American, bright, optimistic feel, and I know there aren't a lot of superhero films, so it's difficult to say it changed them or whatever, but it's definitely not Superman. And while
Kevin Conroy also, by the way, did different voices for Bruce and Batman.
Yeah.
Although his was less of a growl.
Yeah, and it came after.
That's what I'm saying. Is that no?
Oh,
what
okay,
I'm saying
sure.
Is that it was. I'm saying this kind of started it, and now it
yeah,
pretty much every interpretation of it has done it since.
Yeah, and I think also, while I made fun of Tim Burton for saying it, I think getting big name actors for comic book movies, that's a trend you could potentially also trace back to this. I mean, I know Marlon Brando isn't Superman, but still. Again, I'm sort of middle leaning towards good on this, and you obviously think this is bad.
Still.
Yeah.
This is heartbreaking.
Yeah, I know. You haven't changed my opinion in the course of an hour, and I haven't changed yours. We've wasted everyone's time, and we're happy to do that here at the Real World Podcast. And we will continue to waste your time. That is our mission to you over the next several episodes of the Cape Crusaders and beyond. Do you have any final comments on Tim Burton's Batman?
No, I'm just... I kind of hope this is the last time I ever watch it.
I don't know. It's blowing my mind that it doesn't. I look at this as just such an incredibly interesting thing to study.
I don't deny that.
Not a phenomenal movie. Like
I don't deny that. It's an unpleasant viewing experience for me.
Okay, I like more of it than I don't like. So there you go. Those are our takes. Heading into this, we said we were going to do both Burton films in one episode, but I discovered
that failed majorly.
Yeah, I discovered I had too much to say about this film, so I did strong arm Mike into separating these out, staggering that schedule, which we will reveal gradually over time. So that's going to do it for this episode. We will be back next time with Batman Returns, another hot Tim Burton joint. Until then, like, comment, subscribe, share, whatever. This has been another episode of the Tape Crusaders, Real World Podcast. Thank you, everybody. Goodbye from Matt. And goodbye.
The fire rises.
The fire rises.